This is a very kind of full circle moment for me. Before we came up, Gary, my husband, said, "You realize we were sitting in this audience 3 years ago listening to this panel, and now every single person who was involved in our journey to have a family is here." If you saw our documentary, you know that I cry at the drop of a hat, so it could happen at any moment. Starting with Ron, Poole, Diane, we came to the planned biological parenting for men for a long time before we had our family. To John Weltman, we used surrogacy. To Connecticut Fertility and Dr. Doyle and Holly and Shannon. So like this is like old home week. I wanted to start off by saying that, well, first of all, I'm Tony Brown, or Anthony Brown, as some of you may know me. I think our parenting journey was a little bit different from others for a couple of reasons. First of all, not only did we want a known donor, but we wanted a known donor and a carrier who would be open to being part of our lives, perhaps for the rest of our lives. We wanted Nicholas, our son, to always know where he came from. And we, as Gary said in the hospital before we left, how do you say goodbye to somebody who gives you your refusal? So we wanted to make sure that we found people who were emotionally strong enough to actually be able to continue on this journey with us. Second thing that made us a little bit different was right after we met Holly and Shannon, and we were kind of going into contract with them, CNN approached us to be part of a big 4-hour documentary at the time entitled Gay in America. So we went back to Holly and Shannon individually and asked them if they would be open to this, and there was negotiation involved and different levels of comfortability, which we all traversed at different times throughout the process, and ultimately, and at the time we had no idea that it was going to be whittled down to what it aired as in June, called Gary and Tony Have a Baby, which was literally just the story of Nicholas and our journey. So it was a strange experience because I never knew whether people were being really nice to us because we were just really nice people or because we had a camera crew behind us. Everybody seemed to like be on their best behavior throughout the whole process with us. And I would like to believe that it's the former, but I am realistic to a certain degree. I also want to tell you a little bit about why we chose to work with an agency. I'm a lawyer. I do trust in estates and family law for gay, lesbian couples and families, and I am perhaps hyper aware of some of the complications that can happen in, gay men creating families. So I wanted to minimize that to the maximum amount. I didn't want to have to worry about the contract issues, and I wanted to have that social counseling network set up in the process. I wanted to make sure that Gary and I had as easy a time as we possibly could. When we met with surrogacy, we met with John, but we didn't only meet with John the first time, we also met with Rachel, who ended up being our social worker, which was great, because John sort of talked us through the process at the initial consultation, and honestly, every surrogacy situation is going to be different. There's so many different variables. The law is still developing. There's emotional differences, and nobody can tell you this is what your surrogacy experience is going to look like. There's always going to be something unexpected. There's always going to be something amazing. There's going to be hard times. There's going to be great times. So we were sitting with that sort of a realization as we were in the room with John, and Rachel kind of picked up on that, and she spoke a little bit to our emotional concerns and what we were trying to figure out emotionally through the journey. So that was wonderful. We also, Gary and I decided that we wanted to make a criteria for us. We wanted to not only do the phone conversations, email conversations with Holly and Shannon, but we wanted to meet them in person before we did anything. So the first time we flew down to Jacksonville, Florida, we met with Holly, and we met in our hotel room. And I knew it was going to be like a great experience when and we met with Noah also, who's Holly's son, who's in the back. We knew it was going to be a great experience when I was going through family photo albums with Holly, and Gary was bouncing on the 2 double beds with Noah. So it worked out really, like, the energies meshed perfectly. And then we went down the first time to meet Shannon, and I have to warn you, Shannon has a sense of humor that might scare you. So just take that with a grain of salt. So we went down, we met with Shannon. She was having peanut butter and jelly sandwiches with her kids, and she made some for us, which was really cool. And that really helped us to feel comfortable, to get to know people face to face before we entered into a contract with them. If I had to give any advice to couples, it's probably going to be advice that I passed on from people who I spoke with. in the journey. We tried to go to as many appointments as we could. We were, with Shannon, we were 9.5 hours away. So, you know, we would fly down at times, we would drive down at times, but it was really important for us to go down there as much as possible, to be at the ultrasounds, to do a dry run at the hospital, which we'll talk about in a second. But we really wanted to be there. The hardest thing, I think, for me was knowing that our child was growing, you know, with Shannon's family, and I wasn't there. You know, we had all of our family members tape little snippets of our voices and telling stories and singing songs. We put it on a CD and we sent it down to Shannon with like a fetal speaker system. So, you know, in all of her spare time, she could just lay there with our family's voices going in her head. But it was sort of our way of trying to be a part of the process, because that for me was kind of difficult. But one of the most important things that we did was do a dry run at the hospital. To really allay the fears or concerns that we had about what was going to, you know, what was going to happen. And at the first time we went to the hospital, we didn't have a camera crew because they initially had said that we couldn't film there. They changed their minds for whatever reason. But what we did find when we went down there was this amazing expatriate Long Island Italian woman named Beth, who was running the birthing center at this southern sort of Bible Belt hospital in North Carolina. And she was wonderful. We talked through everything. We went down to the vital records department. We told them who we were. We were the first gay couple with a surrogate ever at this hospital, possibly in North Carolina. But they were great. You know, we had the copy of the pre-birth order, and we, you know, walked them through everything, asked them if they had questions of us, told them when they were going to expect us, and that when we come back, you know, at that point I think we found out that when we came back we were going to have a camera crew just to let them know. That was really important for me, to go down and to walk through that process ahead of time, wherever your surrogate is. I think that the most amazing aspect for me was the hospital experience. If you saw our documentary, you saw that we missed our birth. Shannon called us the weekend that she went into, that her water broke and had to have an emergency C-section. She said, you know what, this is my last weekend, so I'm just going to turn the phone off. I'm not going to talk to anybody. Gary and I are like, excellent. We'll turn our phones off too. And we'll stay up all late, we'll watch movies. Well, meanwhile, her water breaks and her mom's trying to call us and our phones are off. So 3 hours later, we get the message, we get in the car and we drive down there. But that experience of being at the hospital, it was very surreal. It was incredible, because your life is like starting over and you've got amazing fears and hopes, and it's kind of indescribable, and I probably shouldn't even try to. It was truly one of the most emotional experiences that I've ever been through. As I said, everybody was amazing to us. I think when I went into the experience, one of my greatest fears before, and when I was sitting in the audience the first time here, was that we would find a person who would be able to give us the child that she had been carrying. And the problem was, when we left, we couldn't say goodbye to her. We had such a hard time saying goodbye to her, because, you know, she's studying for midterms. She's like totally, you know, cool about everything. And Gary and I are in an emotional wreck in the other room, you know, and she was fine. But that experience, that's something emotionally you may want to think about comparing yourself. The last thing that I want to say, Ron had asked me if there was anything that I wished CNN would have shown, and they had so much footage of us. They had a lot of footage that I'm really glad that they didn't show. But the one thing that I wish that they would have shown was the dedication ceremony that we had for our son at our church. Because we were getting a lot of, like, sort of opposition, religious opposition to this. CNN and Soledad O'Brien got a lot of opposition because they told our story. And other people were saying, well, why aren't you telling the other side of the story? As if there's another way Gary and I could have had our family. But I think they wanted, like, to have like a person who was going to tell the religious rights version of or take on gay parenting or whatever. But they didn't do that. They were very clear that we're telling a documentary story about one family and their journey on having a child. And I really wanted them to show, basically everybody came up, our family and friends came up to this dedication ceremony in this beautiful church, the Fourth Universalist Society on Central Park West. Beautiful, beautiful church. We had this great ceremony, and they shot that, but ultimately that was the one thing that one of the things that they left out in the documentaries, which I wish that they would have put in. beforehand, before the whole process started, that we wanted people who we could continue to be, you know, friends and family with. So I guess the only thing I would say to you is, you know, talk with everybody you can now, and find out about how their relationships are working, and understand that whatever choice you make is fine. There's some people who don't necessarily want to, you know, have any outside involvement in their own nuclear family once it's created through surrogacy, which is fine for them. But you just need to make up your mind before you go into the agency, and then the agency will work with you to find the right person. We had to respect, you know, what boundaries and what rules she was going to create for how she was going to explain it to other people. And one of the concerns that we had up front that Shannon overcame when we first started talking to her was where she lived, because I grew up in the South. I know, you know, what it was like being, you know, a young gay man in the South, and it was not easy. And to imagine, you know, carrying a gay couple's child and having to deal with that, you know, that aspect of it. You know, I had concerns about that, which weren't, you know, taken care of until we met. But you really do have to realize that you can support, you know, the pregnancy, but it's not your pregnancy; it's your carrier's pregnancy. They ultimately make the final decisions, and that was brought very, very powerfully to our attention when we went down to one of the doctor's appointments, and the doctor, in no uncertain terms, told us that Shannon was her patient, that we were not her patients, and it was kind of harsh. But I think it was a very clear delineation that, you know, that their role at that point was about Shannon and taking care of Shannon's health. So things that you know don't necessarily expect, but will happen.